If only they'd had a landline. That was something I couldn't help but think while I was watching the Regal Mystery movie, which was Primate, and it's coming out this weekend. As of the recording of this, it's Wednesday the 7th, and its official release date is the 9th. So Thursday previews, probably when this goes up, will have already happened. If you haven't seen the trailer yet, the basic premise is there is this chimp named Ben he lives with his family. There's a reason why. It's not because he's just some sort of exotic pet or whatever. He's with this family and he ends up contracting rabies. So think Cujo chimp style. That's really what this is. It's a very simple story. It does not outstay its welcome. Family members and friends get basically trapped by this chimp in the house because they kind of live in an isolated area. There's not many places they can escape to, and the chimp is faster, he's stronger, and he's pretty smart because he's a chimp. I have some questions about the level of his intelligence in this movie. This is not a perfect film, but I felt that it was decently made for what it was. It's nothing that thinks it's better than it's really trying to be, and despite a few little tiny missteps along the way, I felt it was pretty enjoyable. I think fans of simple horror movies, simple survival type movies will enjoy this for the most part, and I felt pretty good about the fact that this was a January film, and yet it didn't completely suck. Does that spell good things for 2026? No idea. There were quite a few things that I liked about this film. It opens up with a chimp ripping off someone's face. You know, it's one of those sort of hook type moments that they show you and then they go back 36 hours before or whatever. I couldn't help but wonder right before it happened whether we would be seeing someone's face being ripped off. And yes, that was shown to us in the very first few moments. The reason I thought that is obviously if you haven't heard about this event already, and maybe there have been other ones like this that happened, there was a chimp, might have been a pet or something, he ripped off a woman's face. These animals are not pets. They're not necessarily fully domesticated. And while we can identify with them on some level because we share a lot of DNA with them, you still have to be careful of the fact that they're a chimp. And they're faster and they're stronger and they're not completely dumb. Okay, I digress. Yeah, it opens up with that and it sets this brutal, uncomfortable tone right away. And something that I mentioned in the live stream discussion I had last night with Deleted Scenes, Kyle Corwith, and Enigma Severus was that this is the type of horror film that for me is pretty effective because it's simple, but not just that. The protagonist, the killer, the threat is something very real. And it just ignites this primal fear in me because it is something that's so realistic. It is potentially something that could happen. Oh, okay, maybe not specifically this type of story, but just the general danger that sometimes can happen if you are in the presence of an animal. So you're immediately set on edge because you know what's about to happen. I mean, I did see portions of the trailer before this going in, before I felt like I would be interested to watch it. So I knew what we were in for. Some other things that I liked. The effects for Ben were surprisingly strong. He was not CGI'd. It was not motion capture work like what was done in Better Man. And no, Kyle, this is not Better Man 2. If there were moments of CGI, and I believe there were because we did talk about that in the live stream, it was used in such a way that it was not overt and distracting. It was very well done. A lot of times Ben was kind of hidden in shadow or they didn't fully focus on his face to give you enough time to register that this is not a real chimp. But the effects of him were good. He was played by an actual actor, and the mannerisms were very much like a chimp. He looked very much like a chimp. He did not look like a man in a chimp suit, like the old Planet of the Apes, or even, let's say, King Kong 1976, even though I love that movie. That was super impressive to me. I like that they did not go the CGI route with him and that they had an actor playing him, and you could tell the difference because it looked Very realistic. Kudos to them for that. Like, seriously, huge props to them. The audience that I was with seemed to be very affected by certain things that were shown. The kills were quite brutal, and the effects of those kills, gnarly. And they didn't look so CGI'd that they took you out of the moment. I'm sure, well, obviously there were parts that were, but that was also done quite well for what it was. There were some jump scares like you have in pretty much all horror movies, thriller movies, whatever. But I thought they were done in such a way that they didn't feel cheap and gimmicky, like so often happens in horror films. The overall effects for this movie were just pretty darn good. I can't say enough good things about that. Like I've already mentioned, it's not overly long, does not overstay its welcome. The pacing works pretty well. You get a solid build-up with the humans. Not so much with Ben before he goes ape. Whatever. Not so much with Ben. You don't see him being normal Ben long enough, probably. This was something that Kyle pointed out, and I agree with that. You don't get much of a baseline for him as a character until things go wrong. So, maybe that was just stuff that they trimmed out, whatever, not a huge complaint. The escalation of the situation was handled pretty well. This ties back to pacing, kept you tense because of the situation that these people were in. The characters were not completely stupid, like what happens so many times in horror movies. Their decisions mostly made sense within the chaos that was happening. However, there were some logic and writing issues that I had. These are not major complaints, so kind of take this with a grain of salt, but it's stuff you can't help but notice when you're watching films like this. There's a moment where these characters are in a particular location. Ben has crawled up like the wall and come down on the other side. There's a cliff face on the other side because the house is up against a cliff. One of the first things I noticed was, why didn't they try to just get out of this location that they were in while he was on the other side? At least one person, maybe they could have gotten to where they needed to be before he could have crawled back up the wall and then come back down on the other side. Little things like that. Someone during the live stream last night had also questioned, I believe it was Kyle, had also questioned why when the characters were in this particular location, they didn't do a certain thing to Ben that would have probably completely ended the story very quickly. Of course, that's why they didn't do it, but it just makes you wonder, did it even occur to the writers at any time to have the characters attempt this thing? At any point in time. Maybe I can get in the immediate moment you're not thinking of this particular thing you could do that would probably end everything pretty quickly. There was another thing they could have done that would have ended everything pretty quickly, but I don't think they had that weapon at hand. I digress again. But maybe they could have showed this attempt at some point, even if it wasn't immediately, because you don't always think of things in the immediate moment. What Kyle mentioned during that live stream last night, I didn't think about it when I was watching the film. So I can give them some grace for that. But it seems to me that maybe the writers, well, the director was one of the writers, maybe could have gone through a few more scenarios of attempts to try to get out of this situation than what were tried. Now, the things that were tried were fine, but it felt like there could have been a little more. Another minor complaint, like I said, it wasn't huge. Something else. This is very typical with horror or action movies or whatever. People being able to survive injuries that would probably kill them pretty quickly. There is a moment where someone is bitten by Ben. It's a very big bite, like in an area where they would have bled out very quickly given the artery that is in this location. Then that person ends up in water. When you're in water and you're bleeding, it's going to bleed more because your wound doesn't have time to try to. That injury was overdone too much. I get that they had to have it happen to create this sense of tension and panic, but it was overdone a little too much because I kept thinking, that person would be dead. They would have bled out in the water because that wound was so huge. I am getting into the weeds on this. Other things, like when you know you need to be super, super quiet, but then you do something stupid like step on something. Really? Come on. And then probably my last couple things were Ben's behavior was a bit inconsistent. As the rabies is overtaking him, there are moments where he doesn't react in the same way to certain things. There was one moment where he hears a noise in a part of the house and he just goes crazy. And that noise leads him to where people are. They're trying to do something to get away. But then there's another situation later where there's another noise being created by different people and complete silence. And he engages in stalking behavior at that point, instead of just outright going after them like he had been doing. I'm not sure that that's something that would really be happening if you had an animal infected with rabies, like he was. Also, his ability to do certain things that required a level of intelligence that it seems to me would not be possible the longer the disease is in him and affecting his brain and everything. Stuff like that. Okay, I'll grant them the fact that they're going to hype stuff up. Things aren't going to be completely realistic. Maybe I just don't know enough about rabies and how it would affect a chimp. So if I'm wrong about these questions, please let me know, because I honestly don't. The little that I know about it makes me question how accurate this really is. Despite all of these things, my overall take is that even though it's messy in some spots, it's pretty effective as a simple survival creature feature horror. It's got gnarly kills, strong kills, good effects. And that outweighs some of these gaps in logic that I've been complaining about for the past few minutes. It does deliver some solid horror moments, even if the writing slips here and there. So I think if you enjoy this type of genre, you'll probably enjoy this movie. And that's all I have to say for now about. As I indicated, it's coming out this weekend. If you get a chance to see it, let me know what you think. All right. Bye.